my brother said. You're just a failure with no future. And my parents nodded. I smiled and said, Okay, then don't call me when you need help. A week later. That was the part that stuck with me, not the insult itself, not even the smug little curl on my brother's face after he said it. No. It was the silence that followed. The silence where there should have been outrage, defense, love. But instead, just quiet agreement. A nod from my father. A sip of wine from my mother, like nothing had been said at all. You're just a failure with no future, Daniel had said loud enough that the clink of silverware against porcelain came to a halt. He smiled that perfect, polished smile. The one that had graced real estate billboards across half the city. I mean, let's be honest here. What have you even done with your life? I didn't speak right away. I didn't need to. My parents were already proving his point. My dad adjusted his glasses and looked back down at his plate. My mom gave a half-hearted sigh, like she was too tired to pretend I was worth defending. I took a slow sip of water and looked at each of them in turn. Then I smiled. Okay, I said, my voice calm and steady. Then don't call me when you need help. And I stood up, folded my napkin, and left. Nobody stopped me. Nobody said a word. Just the faint scrape of a fork on ceramic as my brother resumed eating. What they didn't know, what none of them had bothered to ask about for years, was that I had been building something. Quietly. Relentlessly. While they were mocking my gigs and side hustles, I was bootstrapping a tech platform that had just secured its first round of major funding. 7 figures. Seed stage. Fully backed by a venture firm that only backed winners. I hadn't told anyone. I didn't need their approval. But that night, as I walked out into the cold December air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. They thought they were burying me. What they didn't realize was, I'd already bloomed. That was just the beginning. 3 days after that dinner, I was sitting in my apartment, an unremarkable little loft I'd been renting since grad school, with exposed brick and a leaky window. But now, it felt different. There was a weight off my shoulders. I wasn't pretending anymore. I didn't care if they saw me as a disappointment. I knew what I had. And then I got the email. Subject line, urgent, regarding Daniel Sutter. My brother's name. I almost didn't open it. But the sender caught my eye. It was from a woman named Olivia Grant, journalist, investigative reporter. She was poking around a scandal brewing in the city's real estate market, and Daniel's name had come up. I read every line twice. Apparently, Daniel's firm had been quietly involved in a series of shell company flips, buying up distressed properties through proxies, inflating their value with fake appraisals, and dumping them on unsuspecting buyers. Classic fraud, dressed up in legal gray areas. And now someone had started talking. Would you be willing to speak to me? Olivia asked at the end of her email. Even off the record. You're listed on public documents as related. I'm just trying to connect a few dots. I stared at the screen for a long time. My brother had always been slick, always knew how to present himself, but I had seen cracks. The rushed calls, the sudden switch from his Mercedes to a leased Audi, the way he deflected when I asked about his commission work last Thanksgiving. Something had been off. But this was the beginning of the end. And it dropped right into my lap. I didn't reply to Olivia. Not yet. I needed to be sure. So I did what I trained myself to do after years of working behind the scenes. I investigated. 2 hours of digging, 3 coffees, and 1 mildly illegal search through an old business contacts access portal later. I had confirmation. He was exposed. And it was only a matter of time before the press caught on. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and let the grin spread across my face. Daniel had just stepped into quicksand, and I had no plans to pull him out. By the 5th day, Daniel's face was still plastered on his firm's website, grinning in that too white smile like nothing in the world could touch him. But behind the scenes, things were unraveling fast. I'd been monitoring everything, stock mentions, press releases, even forum chatter. And sure enough, on a niche finance subreddit, a user posted, Sutter and Lane cooked appraisals in East Ridge flips. I've seen the documents. Fed's sniffing around. I knew Daniel would see it. He always watched online chatter, especially anything with his name attached. He used to joke. The internet's like a mirror, you gotta keep polishing your reflection. I guess he didn't realize it could also be a window. One that people could see straight through. The next morning, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Eli? Hey, it's Daniel. He said it like we were catching up after a casual lunch. No mention of the dinner, no hint of what he'd said to me in front of our parents. I leaned back in my chair, already amused. Haven't heard from you in a while, I said. He chuckled, but it was thin, like it hurt. Yeah, listen, this is a little awkward, but I might need a favor. And there it was. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make him squirm. Then I said, a favor. From your failure brother? His voice caught. Okay, look, I know things got a little heated last week. But family's family, right? I nearly laughed out loud. Let me guess, I said. You're in trouble. Something about bad appraisals? Fake shell buyers? Olivia Grant ring any bells? Silence. Then he sighed, sharp and defeated. How much do you know? Enough, I said. And more than that, you've already lost. You just don't know how deep it goes yet. There was a pause. I imagined him pacing his office, probably pulling the blinds down like that would make the walls stop closing in. I just need someone to help with damage control, he said, a little quieter. Investors are nervous. If I could show I've got backing from a tech player with clean books. That's what this is about. I cut him off. You found out about my startup. Another pause. That told me everything. Look, he said, your company's getting attention. If you put in a statement of support, just something simple, it could steady things. I looked out the window. The skyline I used to resent was suddenly just background. Static. Daniel, I said, my voice calm, measured, final. I warned you. Don't call me when you need help. And I hung up. He'd learn soon enough, this wasn't just about letting him drown. This was about making sure the whole family saw it happen. That night, I opened my old photo archive, years of forgotten holiday dinners, birthdays where I was half smiling in the background while Daniel opened gift after gift, and vacations I wasn't invited to. I scrolled past the memories, looking not for nostalgia, but for fuel. It wasn't about bitterness anymore. This was clarity. I selected a few choice images. Daniel making a toast at the family's 4th of July barbecue, my dad proudly patting his back, my mom laughing at some offhand joke. I saved them to a folder. Then I opened up another browser window and logged into a private platform I'd been beta testing for months, a whistleblower portal we'd built into the back end of my startup. One of the key features? Controlled leak distribution. It was designed to protect journalists and insiders, but tonight, it had another use. I drafted an anonymous upload, attaching 3 documents I'd quietly compiled over the past few days, a report from a former intern at Daniel's firm detailing unethical practices, an internal memo showing falsified inspection records, and an email thread between Daniel and one of the appraisers, enough to raise eyebrows, and enough for Olivia Grant to take it seriously. I hit send. Then I poured myself a drink and waited. 2 hours later, Olivia emailed me directly. Received. Verifying. This is big. She didn't know it was me. She didn't have to. The next morning it hit. Her article dropped like a hammer. Local real estate star tied to fraudulent property scheme. It wasn't just Daniel's name on the front page. It was his photo, that perfect, confident smile now framed by phrases like misleading valuations and pending investigation. My phone buzzed almost immediately. First my aunt. Then a cousin. Then, finally, my mother. I let them all go to voicemail. By noon, Daniel's face was off his firm's homepage. His LinkedIn had gone dark. And the best part? The comments section under Olivia's article was tearing into him like a pack of wolves. But I wasn't done. See, there's a thing about tech people. We understand narrative. Influence. I called one of our marketing leads and said, "Let's highlight our new investor this week, tie it to a message about integrity and transparency." Within hours, there was a blog post up about my company, with a headline that read, "Building the Future Backed by Integrity, Why Trust Still Matters in Tech." And beneath it? My face. My name. My words. The failure had arrived. I didn't answer the door when they first knocked. I let them stand out there a while, long enough for the weight of their sudden silence to start sinking in. The knock came again, firmer this time. Then my mom's voice, muffled but urgent. "Eli, honey, please. Can we talk?" I waited a few more seconds before opening the door. She looked smaller than I remembered. My father stood behind her, arms crossed, uncomfortable in the same way someone gets when their usual script no longer works. And Daniel, he looked like someone had scooped out everything that made him smug and left just the shell. No blazer. No wristwatch. No smirk. I didn't invite them in. I just stood in the doorway and waited. "We had no idea," my mom said quickly. "All that stuff about Daniel, it's horrible. Just horrible. Must have been hard to read," I said. My father stepped in. "We didn't come to argue. We came because we misjudged you, Eli." That almost made me laugh. Misjudged? You sat across the table and nodded while he called me a failure. Daniel finally spoke. "Look, I was out of line. I was under a lot of pressure, and I didn't mean." "You did mean it," I interrupted, voice low and calm. "You meant every word. And now that your name is burning across every financial blog in the state, suddenly I'm worth talking to?" He looked away. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, leaning on the railing. The air was cool, and for once, it felt like I could breathe in front of them. "We're just asking if you'd consider helping him," my mother said. "He's your brother." I nodded slowly. "Right. The same brother who laughed when you stopped pretending to respect me. The same parents who didn't say a word while I stood up and walked out. My dad rubbed his forehead like this was exhausting for him. You're not being fair, Eli. We made mistakes, but this affects the whole family." "No," I said, stepping forward, my voice cutting clean. "What affects this family is how you all decided who mattered and who didn't. And now you're standing on my doorstep, not because you care, but because you need something." They didn't deny it. Daniel finally looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw something real in his eyes, not ego, not calculation, but panic. "Please, Eli," he said. "They're talking about criminal charges. I could lose everything." I nodded slowly. "You already have." And then I walked back inside and shut the door. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the city blur into soft golds and silvers. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I didn't. Not because I regretted anything. I didn't. But because this was the part they never understood, the silence after the storm. The part where I was still the same guy they dismissed. Just a little more awake now. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "I'm sorry. I really am. I didn't know you'd come this far." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then typed back. "I didn't come this far. I built it." I hit send and turned off my phone. They had finally seen what I'd been quietly creating. And I was just getting started. 2 days later, I walked into the local tech expo as a keynote speaker. Not just a panelist. The keynote. The room was packed. Startups, investors, press, a few wide-eyed college kids looking for hope in a world that keeps trying to grind them down. As I stepped up to the mic, I spotted her, Olivia Grant, near the back, notebook in hand. I gave her a small nod. It was time to control the story. 10 years ago, I began. Someone told me I was a failure with no future. I believed them for a while. It's hard not to, when it comes from people you love. But the truth is, some of us grow roots in silence. Some of us build while no one's watching. The room was still. Focused. I paced the stage slowly, letting it all flow. They say success is the best revenge. I disagree. Clarity is. Knowing exactly who you are and not needing anyone's permission to exist that way. You don't need to scream it. You don't need to prove it. You just have to live it, loudly, quietly, however you want, but you live it. Applause. More than I expected. Real, honest applause. After the talk, people lined up to shake my hand. VCs handed me cards. Founders asked about partnerships. And right at the end of the line? My father. He looked tired. Like the kind of tired that doesn't come from sleep deprivation, but from finally realizing the house he built had no foundation. I saw your speech, he said. Your mother and we're proud of you. Are you? I asked, genuinely curious. Or just surprised? He didn't answer. I didn't press. Because deep down, I knew they weren't proud. They were just afraid now, afraid of being left behind by the son they never thought would matter. And I was finally okay with that. The exposé didn't end with the article. Olivia followed up with a full segment on a national news podcast, detailing the fraud, the shell buyers, the cooked numbers, and Daniel's face was front and center in the thumbnail. A polished professional turned cautionary tale. Within a week, regulatory agencies launched a formal investigation. His firm went into panic mode, deleting BIOS, issuing vague statements about compliance reviews. His partners were jumping ship faster than rats from a sinking boat. And my inbox? Full. Investors. Journalists. Job candidates. Speaking invitations. Funny how fast the world changes when people stop doubting you. But there was one last card I had to play, something personal, something just for us. I waited until Saturday. Family dinner day. My parents had invited me, again. This time, it wasn't an obligation. It was a performance. They wanted to be seen. Making peace. Showing the world that everything was fine. So I went. The house hadn't changed. Same dusty cabinet of old trophies, all Daniel's. The graduation photo where I was cropped slightly to the side. The good china on the table, like we were honoring some tradition that had never really included me. Daniel sat across from me. He looked like a ghost of the man I grew up with. Pale, thinner. That unshakable confidence? Gone. Dinner was awkward. Stilted. My mother tried. We're just so happy to have you here, Eli. And proud of you. Of all your success. Thank you, I said, polite, letting the word hang like a trap. Because I hadn't come to eat. Halfway through the meal, I pulled out a small stack of papers and slid them across the table toward Daniel. He stared at them, confused. Then he saw the header, Non-Disclosure and Settlement Agreement. I bought out one of your firm's minority stakeholders this week, I said. The one who still had access to the internal email chain. I now own 10% of the company. Daniel's jaw clenched. My parents blinked, confused. You're bluffing, he said. I slid over a second document, his signature. From the original founding paperwork. Now part of my legal claim. I'm not bluffing, I said. And I'm offering you a way out. You signed this document, step away quietly, and I won't push for criminal charges. You keep what dignity you have left. Silence. My mother whispered. Eli, this isn't necessary. Neither was calling me a failure, I said without looking at her. Daniel swallowed hard. He looked at my father, but there was no rescue coming from that end of the table. Just more quiet realization. After a moment, he picked up the pen. Signed. Done. I stood, folded the papers, and tucked them back into my coat. I looked around the room, this house full of ghosts and old roles I no longer fit into. And then I said the one thing I'd never said before. I forgive you. My father looked startled. My mother teared up. Daniel? He couldn't even meet my eyes. I forgive you, I repeated. But don't mistake that for reconciliation. And with that I walked out of the house, and out of their story. Because I was writing my own now. I didn't look back when I left their house. Not because I was angry, though a younger version of me would have stormed out with fire in his chest, but because, for the first time, I didn't need their validation. That weight, the quiet desperation for their approval, had finally slipped off my shoulders like an old coat that never fit right to begin with. I had my own story now. My own name. My own company that, just 3 days later, got featured in a Forbes piece about the quiet founders changing the game. I wasn't loud. I didn't post about revenge. I didn't gloat. But people noticed. One of our earliest investors called me after reading the article. "Eli," he said, "I didn't realize you had that kind of fire in you." I smiled. "You weren't supposed to. Because the truth is, the best moves are the ones nobody sees coming, not until the board flips and they realize the king they ignored just called checkmate." As the weeks passed, Daniel faded further from public memory. His firm dissolved quietly. No press statement. No farewell tour. Just a LinkedIn update that said former partner, as if the collapse of everything he'd built was a minor footnote. My parents stopped calling. I didn't block them. I didn't have to. The silence between us now said more than any lecture or apology ever could. But there was one call I did take, one I hadn't expected. My niece. Daniel's daughter. She'd found my website, read about the company. "Uncle Eli," she said shyly, "I didn't know you were doing all this. My dad never talked about it." I paused, heart caught in my throat. "I know," I said gently. "But that's okay. Now you know." She asked if she could intern for us next summer. I told her yes, of course. Because the cycle had to break somewhere. And I was ready to be the one to do it. Not with anger. With purpose. It's strange how quiet success feels. Not the kind you shout about, but the kind that settles deep in your bones. Not because you've won, but because you've finally let go of the need to prove that you ever had to. Looking back, I don't regret how it played out. Not the silence. Not the distance. Not even the revenge. Sometimes the only way to heal is to stop asking why they didn't love you right, and start loving yourself without permission. If I could give anyone advice, it'd be this. Build in the dark. Let them underestimate you. Let them forget your name. And when the time comes, let your work speak so loudly they can't ignore you anymore. I didn't become their version of success. I became mine.